John always prided himself on knowing every route, every curve, every pothole. But that night, something was wrong. He took a road that didn't exist on the GPS. And then, there was no way out. The headlights only illuminated the empty ahead, and the radio whispered voices that weren't his. A long time. Suddenly, what should have been a simple delivery became a fight to escape a place where no one ever returns. Are you ready to enter the road of the missing? John Harlow was a veteran of the roads. For more than 20 years, he drove the nation's highways, transporting everything from household appliances to perishable foods. He knew every shortcut, every detour that could save hours of travel. His truck, nicknamed Old Faithful, never lets him down. That night, he had a simple mission: deliver a load of medical supplies to a hospital in another city. The route was familiar, and he was confident he would finish before dawn. The clock on the dashboard showed 1:15 in the morning when he decided to take a secondary road, a shortcut that, according to his calculations, would save a good 40 minutes. The sky was clear, cloudless, and the full moon illuminated the empty road ahead. He tuned into his usual radio station and relaxed in the seat, as he did on every night trip. It was a night like any other, or, at least. As soon as he entered the country road, something changed. The GPS on his phone blinked for a second, the screen went black, and then the device restarted, as if it had lost signal. John shrugged. The road was simple, a long straight line with few curves. He doesn't need GPS for that route. Everything was under control, at least he. After a few minutes of driving down the deserted road, John began to notice something strange. There were no more road signs. No indication of nearby towns, gas stations, or anything familiar. Just a long line of asphalt cutting across the desert ahead. He adjusted his glasses to the high light, trying to see further, but the darkness seemed only endless. The radio. John checked the. Finally. John slammed on the brakes, stopping a safe distance from the truck in front. The light from its headlights illuminated the rusty rear of that ghost vehicle. His heart raced, and he opened the steering wheel with such force that his knuckles remained white. John's mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was an abandoned truck, but the eyes were united. And who would leave a vehicle like that in the middle of the road with everything working? Taking a deep breath, he tried to activate the communication radio, adjusting the frequency to try to capture some signal from this section. "This is John Harlow from the Archer Transporter. Can anyone hear me?" Your voice is so firm, but inside you, the discomfort only grew. Silence. Just static sound or radio. He tried again. "Truck in front of me, listen. Is everything okay?" Again, nothing. Trying to remain calm, John blinked his eyes once, twice, 3 times, in an attempt to get the driver's attention, but the truck showed no sign of life. It was as if he was being programmed by a shadow, an invisible entity. Or worse, as if it were abandoned and at the same time. John swallowed hard and decided the only thing he could do was move on. Turn off the shoulder, pass that truck and continue your journey. It's just an old, abandoned truck. It must have broken, that's all, he muttered to himself, as if the words could dispel the suffocating feeling that something terrible was happening. Then an even darker thought crossed his mind. What if the driver wasn't there anymore? Why didn't he ever leave? Chill ran down his spine, but John sped up. Passing the truck and looking in the rear view mirror, the vehicle disappeared into the darkness. But that feeling that something was deeply wrong didn't leave him. He knew deep down that he shouldn't be there on the road. As soon as he returned to the track, his radio screeched again, interrupting his thoughts. This time, the static was accompanied by a voice. A weak, distant, and almost inaudible voice. "You two will stay here." John felt his body freeze. He turned off the radio immediately, his heart beating so hard it felt like it wanted to come out of his chest. Something was coming for him. And that road wasn't A. John took a deep breath, trying to stay focused on the road ahead. The ghost truck was already long gone, and the voice on the radio. Well, it must have been interference or a delirium of tiredness, Pens. While doubt began to invade his mind. Maybe he was exaggerating. Maybe it was just an illusion caused by the exhaustion of so many hours behind the wheel. It wasn't uncommon for drivers to see strange things after long night trips. Road hallucinations. However, something on that road was different. He never feels so isolated. Time seemed to pass more slowly, almost as if he were trapped in some kind of limbo. He looked at the clock on the dashboard, 2:45 in the morning. He had been on the road for over an hour, but he didn't seem to have made much progress. Trying to shake off the discomfort, he turned on the radio again, searching for a station that could fill the oppressive silence. The radio chirped for a moment and then suddenly played an old country song. An immediate rupture occurred with him. A familiar song. Something solid to anchor reality. The soft sound of violence and the singer's drawling voice, sincere, sincere, your nerves. But as he continued listening, John heard something strange about the music. The lyrics, which he knew by heart, seemed to have changed. The singer whispered words he had never heard before. Something about not leaving the road and never looking back. The tone was slow, almost as if he was giving a warning. John's heart started to beat faster. He turned off the radio with a click. Now His fingers tightened on the steering wheel and he shook his head. "I need to stay calm. I'm tired, that's all. Once I get on the main road again, everything will be fine." He knew I needed to keep going. There was a delivery to make, and the hospital depended on supplies. This is focused and focused. It was just a strange route. John sped up, keeping his eyes fixed on the road, refusing to look in the rearview mirror. He couldn't afford to think about anything else. It was just a road. It was just a trip. Everything. But no. Time passing, but the road seemed to have no end. John was already tired of fighting the uncomfortable feeling that was crawling inside him, trying to convince himself that everything was the result of tiredness. He looked at the horizon, hoping to see some sign, any sign of civilization, but nothing surgical. No gas stations, no ratings, not a single living soul. Suddenly, in the distance, he saw something, flashing lights on the side of the road. A small gas station. Finally, a stopping point. Relief immediately washed over his tense body. He decided to stop to stretch his legs, have a coffee, maybe even ask if anyone knew that route. There would be an explanation for all that. As he parked the truck near the rusty gas pumps, he noticed how old the place looked. As if frozen in time. The sign blinked irregularly, with some letters burned out. Joe_SG_S, the sign said. It must have been an old gas station called Joe's Gas. Strangely, there were no other cars around. John got out of the truck and entered the small supermarket. The doorbell tinkled and the sound echoed around the room, but the place was deserted. The shelves had few products, and the smell of dust and gasoline hung in the air. From behind the counter, an elderly man emerged. His skin was wrinkled, and he wore a faded trucker hat. His eyes were tired, but there was something else there, a certain understanding, as if he knew something. The part it shouldn't have. Joao Franzi. The John left for the old man. Before Joao. No one leaves this road without paying a price. John returned to the truck with his stomach churning and his nerves on edge. The old man's words still echoed in his mind. This road is not a shortcut, it is a trap. He entered the cabin, closed the door, and took a deep breath, trying to laugh. It's just a road. It's just a crazy old man, he said to himself as he turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared, and the headlights alone illuminated the asphalt ahead. But deep down, John knew better. As I continued down the road, the atmosphere seemed to get heavier. The trees on the sides leaned towards the path, as if watching your passage. The darkness around him was almost palpable, an oppressive presence that squeezed his chest. The only thing he could hear was the constant hum of the engine and the faint sound of his sweaty hands slipping on the steering wheel. It was then that the truck's radio screeched. Static filled the cabin, the same sound I heard before, but this time more intense, as if something was trying to connect. John frowned, looking at the device on the dashboard. He hadn't turned on the radio, but somehow he was running by. The hissing stopped for a second, and a voice trailed off. You still have time. Get off the road. Come back. The voice continues, more insistent, come back, before it's too late. His first instinct was to turn off the radio, but something made him hesitate. The words of the old man at the gas station came to the surface. The voices will guide you, but distant. There was another path behind John. The headlights were low, almost trailing the road. The vehicle, old and rusty, resembled the same truck he had overtaken before. The ghost truck. You're without. Then, suddenly, the radio screeched again. Don't look back, just move forward. John blinked, stunned. Go straight on? As with. You won't escape. Of. John. You're. Keep going. Don't stop. They're coming. John continued driving, chest tight, trying to keep his eyes focused on the road as the tension only increased. The voice on the radio had disappeared, leaving only the sound of the engine and the wind whistling outside. Everything was calm, but he knew the danger had not passed. The road ahead seemed darker and the night thicker. There was something approaching. He could feel it. After a few more kilometers, he saw lights along. It was a break with some sign of civilization. As we drove up, we saw that it was a small roadside cafe, one of those places that are open 24 hours a day to cater to tired drivers. He hesitated. Should I stop? The voice on the radio. He decided. The cafe had a simple sign that said, "Welcome drivers," in red neon. The place seemed quiet, with only 2 other cars parked outside. John got out of the truck, looking around, alert for any sign of danger. Nothing. Just the silence of the night and the distant of crickets. He entered the cafe, the doorbell sounding all too familiar, just like the gas station. The interior was lit by white fluorescent lights, giving the place a cold, lifeless feel. The few tables were empty except for a man at the counter, drinking a coffee while reading an old newspaper. The attendant, a middle-aged woman with a tired look, was behind the counter, confused about something, apparently oblivious to what was going on. That he feels a little safe, but the feeling that he doesn't. As I drove, the surrounding landscape began to change. The trees, once tall and green, became distorted shadows, their trunks seeming to contort into grotesque shapes. John has focused on the road, but his mind is. Suddenly, the radio crackled again, and the voice returned, more urgent this time. The road splits soon. On the left is. John's heart skipped a beat. He was at a bend, and the fork was approaching quickly. He caught a glimpse of a shadow moving quickly behind him, a movement so fast it seemed unearthly. The voice on the radio sounded again, "Don't look back." With one last nervous glance in the rearview mirror, he saw something indescribable, a hooded figure with narrow eyes that avoided piercing his soul. Without hesitation, he comes. "Don't stop." John glanced quickly at the road ahead, trying to ignore the terrifying presence behind him. The truck shook under the pressure of the accelerator, and he could feel his heart beating frantically in his chest. But for an instant, the light in front of him seemed to waver. He felt a wave of panic, wondering if he had made the wrong choice. The hooded figure was still there, and he knew. "Continue," the voice